All right, guys. I'm going to start making a few videos for you to watch. My dog will behave herself. So anyway, I'm going to make some short videos so you can kind of watch these at your leisure. I know a lot of you have weird schedules, and it's easier to watch, 15, 20-minute video than an hour lecture or something like that. So I'm going to try to divide these up into small, little mini lectures, and then I'll put them out there for you to view. And then you can go back and look at them at your convenience. So we're going to start chapter 1 and kind of go through that. This is really just an overview of what we're going to be learning about. We'll also go through some orientation of the body parts and directional terms, that type of thing. We'll also do a lot of that in lab, so you're going to kind of get it in both places. So hopefully it'll stick with you, because this is something that you're going to use throughout the next 2 semesters. And you'll also use this clinically when you get out in the field once you get a job in the medical industry. So the first thing we're going to look at is just the human body. How do we look at it? What do we look at when we're studying the human body? And there's 2 parts that we're really going to look at. We're going to look at, one, the anatomy, and that's where we really kind of look at the parts and pieces. And then we're going to look at the physiology, where we look at how it works. So learning and understanding the terminology allows you to communicate accurately with your colleagues in health sciences. Again, you'll be making charts and communicating with doctors and other healthcare professionals using some of this terminology. This thing sometimes sticks, so I'm going to have to give it a second here. Once it goes to the next slide, then usually it'll operate properly. I don't know why it does this on Loom, but it just does. I think because I had the cheap version. This video is actually on Blackboard, so you can watch this. This just has a career connection, just telling you why you're learning what you're learning, and basically just kind of giving you an overview of what we're going to be studying in this chapter. Now, again, I mentioned this already, but we have 2 different things that we're going to be studying in this course, and that's going to be anatomy, and that's the structure of body parts and their relationship to one another. Where are they located? What does it comprise of? Is it a system where we have a lot of different organs working together, or is it down at the cellular level? So we're going to kind of get in depth with the anatomy and look at, again, the parts and pieces. That's kind of what anatomy is. And then we'll look at physiology. Physiology is the hard part. Anatomy, that's just strict memorization. But understanding the physiology, the function of the body parts, how they work to carry out life-sustaining activities, that's the tough part of this course. And that's what you're probably going to have the most trouble with. So I tend to focus more on the physiology than the anatomy, because, again, with the anatomy, you can simply look at diagrams and things and memorize that. You're going to have a lot of that in lab. We're looking at bones, and we're looking at muscles, and we're looking at various organs of the different systems and that kind of thing. So that's pretty easy. Again, it's just spending the time doing it and studying all those parts and pieces. But that physiology, that gets a little more in depth, and that's where I'll spend most of our time. Now, the anatomy, we have 2 types of anatomy. We look at what we call gross anatomy, or macroscopic. And I'm going to post a list of Latin prefixes and suffixes. I think your book actually has them in the back. I highly, highly encourage you to memorize those. In fact, I may put some of those on your first test, because when you're reading the text, you're going to be able to pick up on some of these prefixes and know what they mean. So when I say macroscopic, macro meaning large, these are visible structures. These are things that we can see with the naked eye. Sometimes, again, we call that gross anatomy. And then regional anatomy looks at all the structures in a particular area of the body. Systemic anatomy looks at just one system, like the cardiovascular, nervous, muscular. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing throughout the semester, is looking at each different system and what organs comprise that system and how those organs work together. And then the surface anatomy looks at internal structures as they relate to the overlying skin. So visible muscle masses, bone projections, things that you can see on the surface of the skin. Can't actually see the muscle or see the bone, but you can see where it protrudes out and know that that's where that muscle is located or that bone is Now, micro, meaning small, this is going to be dealing with structures that are too small for us to see with the naked eye. And we're going to study a couple of things in lab, especially. Um, we're going to look at cytology, which is basically the study of cells. And then we're going to look at histology, which is the study of tissues. You're going to have to identify various cells and tissues under the microscope for labs. I'm not going to spend, again, a lot of time and lecture on that because you're going to get that in the lab section. No matter if you have me or someone else, you'll get the same instruction on that. Developmental anatomy, that studies the physiological development throughout life, and then embryology is the study of the development before you're born and how the egg and sperm unite and become a fetus that eventually becomes a child. Um, so again, you need to know the terminology and been able to observe, manipulate, palpate, and osculate. It's going to be very helpful, especially in lab when we start looking at some of these structures. All right. Now, physiology, again, is the tougher part of this, and that's because you're having to understand how things work. So we're going to look at different systems of the body. An example here, renal, which is the kidney and the elimination of nitrogenous waste, and then cardiovascular physiology. How does the heart pump? How does it contract? What stimulates that muscle to contract? So we're going to look at that and look at the chemical reactions and things that occur within those cells that make them do what they actually do. So there's a couple of things you need to understand. This isn't strictly a biology class. There's going to be a lot of chemistry, a lot of physics, and you need to have at least a basic understanding of that. And that's what these first couple of chapters are going to do for us. It's going to allow me to kind of give you an overview of general biology, general chemistry, and general physics, so that when we talk about things like electrical impulses, you understand what voltage is and what amperage is, those type things. You understand what an ion is in chemistry, positive ion like a cation, negative ion like an anion, and you'll need to understand how those work, what makes them an ion, why they have the charge they do, a lot of different things. So again, it's not going to be super in depth with chemistry and physics, but we are going to touch on that and kind of go back into it. So if you've never had that before, this may be a little tough section for you. You might want to spend a little extra time learning about that before we move on. So again, if something you haven't had in a long time or ever, this may be a little tougher on you than someone, let's say, that just got out of high school that had this stuff recently. They may understand the physics and chemistry a lot better. Now, anatomy and physiology are inseparable. So function always reflects structure. And basically what that means is that what the object looks like or what the organ looks like is going to kind of tell us what the physiology of that organ is and what does it do. So let's take the heart for an example. It's made of muscle, it's hollow, we have chambers, and those chambers fill with blood, and that's what pumps that blood throughout the system, the cardiovascular system. So that's what we mean by function always reflects structure. That structure looks like it's going to do what it needs to do. So again, if we want to pump blood, we need a hollow muscular organ to contract and squeeze that blood into vessels and move it along and build up blood pressure and that type of thing. Right? So again, we'll get into that some more when we get to each system that we're going to study. All right? So again, our teeth are a good example of complementarity of structure and function. So our front teeth, the incisors, these are the ones that kind of snap things off, and they cut like scissors. So you can see a carrot here being eaten. So we kind of bite those off. A lot of our herbivore type animals have incisors. If you've ever looked into a horse's mouth or a deer's mouth, they clip grass clippings and things like that to eat using those. We are what we call an omnivore. We eat meat and we eat plant materials. We have teeth that are going to be designed to do a lot of different things. So we have our canine teeth here that are made for tearing and ripping meat, but then we have these incisors in the front that are made for clipping vegetable matter and that type thing. And then the molars in the back, these are used for grinding, and we use this for grinding vegetable matter, and we also use it to grind um, meat and that kind of thing that we eat. So we are kind of a cross between what we call a true herbivore and a true carnivore. We kind of fall in the middle, and we really lean more towards the herbivore side than the carnivore because we don't really have the big canine teeth like your dog or cat would have that strictly eat meat. So again, we're kind of a combination, but we do have the ability to break down proteins, and we can eat meat most of the time successfully and get our nutrients from that. And there's a lot of things in meat products that we need, like iron and proteins and things that we can get from that source. But we can actually eat a fully vegetarian diet and survive. We have to eat the right things to get the right amino acids and things that we need to build our proteins. Um, so again, we're kind of designed to do both, and that's what we mean by complementarity of function and structure. That the structure of the organ, or in this case, the teeth, kind of determines what that's going to do for us. Right, structural organization. The human body is very organized from the smallest chemical level to the whole organism. And I can guarantee you will see this on your test. You will need to know these different levels of organization. So we start out at the chemical level with atoms, molecules, and organelles. And then those make up cells. Cells then make up tissues. Tissues then make up organs. And then organs make up organ systems. And then all of those organ systems working together make up the organism itself, right? So this is just kind of the hierarchy of how we look at the various structures in the human body. And again, we start down at the smallest with the individual atoms that make up our cells, and then we look at the whole organism as a whole to kind of study how all those organ systems work together. All right. So again, atoms form molecules, molecules form organelles, organelles form cells, cells form tissues, tissues form organs form organ systems, and then that eventually leads to the entire organism. Right? So make sure you know these levels of structural organization. Again, I promise you will see this on the test, your first test that we're going to have. Another thing you're going to see on your test is the requirements for life. We have to have certain things in order to survive. And if we don't get these or have these life functions, then we can't keep the body working properly. So one, we have to maintain boundaries. So just think of your skin. If you didn't have your skin, all your blood would leak out and you would die. All right? If we couldn't move, something would probably eat us or kill us. All right? Kind of think in terms of living back thousands of years ago and what we had to go through, because that's how we kind of evolved into what we are. So if we couldn't move, we couldn't get out of the way, something would catch us and eat us. And that's not only the movement of our body, but movement of substances even through the body by moving blood through our cardiovascular system to feed our cells and get them oxygen and take away waste and that kind of thing. Responsiveness, we need to be able to respond to stimuli. If I put my hand on something hot, I want to pull it away very quickly so I don't injure myself. Digestion, we take large molecules, break those down into small ones, and that's what we do when we eat. And then metabolism is using the energy that we get from the food that we eat to carry out our life functions, right? And then through that process of metabolism, we also produce waste, and we need to get rid of those through excretion, mainly through the kidney and through feces that we release. But we also lose some of that through sweat. So we produce waste products like urea. We can sweat some of that out, and we can urinate most of that out to get rid of that toxic compound. Reproduction, again, this is not only for reproduction of the human species, but it's also for reproduction of cells when we injure ourselves and we need to replace old, worn out cells. And then the last thing is growth, where we go through development and we start off as a child and we grow into a larger adult. And eventually we reach adulthood and we stop growing in some ways, and in other ways we continue growing. We still grow cells, and certain body parts like your ears and nose continue to grow the rest of your life. Right. So again, this is just going to explain each one of these. I kind of already went over this in the last slide, but again, maintaining boundaries. We separate internal versus external. We do that at the cellular level with plasma membrane or the cell membrane to separate cells inside from outside. And again, the skin I've already mentioned keeps our blood and things inside and keeps bad things outside. Movement, again, moving the body, moving fluids and things through the body. So that's one of those key life functions. Responsiveness, again, we have to respond to stimuli to prevent injury. Digestion, again, breaking down food. Metabolism, using the energy. And we're going to look at metabolism later on in the semester a little more detail, but it's basically made up of two components. We have catabolism, which is breaking down molecules, and anabolism and building back. And it's the sum of those two reaction types that make up our metabolism. You may hear this term used incorrectly sometimes, where people say, you know, I have a fast metabolism, a slow metabolism. Really, what they're meaning is that they have an imbalance with their catabolic reactions versus anabolic. If you are a person that breaks down things faster than you build them, you'll be one of those type people that can eat tons of food and never gain a pound. It's the other way around, and your anabolic reactions are more prevalent than the catabolic reactions. That's going to be the type of person that can look at a piece of cake and gain 10 pounds. So again, it's the balance between those two, catabolism and anabolism, that makes up our metabolism. And again, I mentioned excretion, getting rid of waste products, urea, carbon dioxide, feces, all of those need to be removed from the body so they do not become toxic. Reproduction, again, we do this at the cellular level and the organismal level. And I went over that with you already. And again, growth is increasing size of a body part for the organism itself. All right, so we are a multicellular organism, which means that we have many different cells doing many different things, and we basically have specialized cells that do a certain job for us, and they're very specific. So what that means is that your liver cell behaves differently than, let's say, your skin cell, because they do different things. And all cells depend on the organ systems in the body to provide them with their survival needs. So, for instance, we need the cardiovascular system to pump blood to our cells to give them nutrients, oxygen, take away waste, or those cells will die. We all know if the heart stops, the body stops. So if we are not pumping blood, let's say to the brain, or we have a blood clot or something like that that blocks blood flow, then we can have some serious issues like stroke, even death. So again, it's very important that we keep all of these organ systems working properly so that the whole body needs are serviced. So there are 11 organ systems that work together to maintain life, and that's really what we're going to be studying the entire semester. So let me zip through these. I think most of you know 90% of this. Probably learned it back in grade school. We all know the different systems of the body, but I just want to kind of run through them so that we can see them. Now, all of these systems are going to work together. Like we see here, we take in food through the digestive system. Those nutrients get put into the blood. The heart pumps that blood. We pick up oxygen from the lung that goes to the cells and feeds the cells. We pick up waste products, and the kidney gets rid of those for us. So all of these are going to work together to keep us alive. And if any of these fail, then our whole body fails, and we'll have what we call organ failure, and then death usually occurs from that. So if someone has liver failure, for instance, or heart failure, eventually that will lead to a bad outcome from that. So the integumentary system, that's the first one we're going to look at. That's your skin, hair, nails. Again, most of you probably may not know the name integumentary, but the integument is the outer covering of the body. Skeletal system, we will learn all about bone markings in lab, and you'll study these. They provide support. This is where blood cells are made. So there's a lot of different functions in each one of these systems. Muscles generate heat, generate movement for us. The brain and nerves send stimuli to our muscles and glands and make us do what we do, like run down the street or jump or send out a hormone from a gland, etc. And then the endocrine system is where we produce hormones. And this is kind of an oddball one because these organs aren't connected physically. They are connected chemically. They communicate by releasing hormones that go from one organ to the next to the next. And we have a cascade of events that occur from that. We'll study this in AMP2. That'll be the first chapter you study in there. And it's a little complicated. And that hormones have a lot of different functions in the body. So we'll learn about those. Cardiovascular, you're probably familiar with the heart and blood vessels. We'll learn about how we pump blood, where that blood goes, the blood flow through the body, and the pathway it takes. Another one you may not be quite as familiar with, that's the lymphatic system and the immune system. These help prevent us from getting sick. And the lymphatic also returns fluid back to the bloodstream so that we don't run low on fluid. Because as we pump blood to our cells, it kind of leaks out of the capillary beds. And then these lymphatics kind of suck it back up and put it back into the circulatory system. We also have immune cells that are housed here that help protect us from pathogens. So if we get a virus or a bacteria, our immune system inside the lymphatic can look for those and destroy them before they can destroy us. The only time we get sick is when our immune system misses some of these pathogens. We come in contact with viruses and bacteria all day long, every day. Most of the time, we are able to take care of them. We produce thousands and thousands and thousands of cancer cells in our lifetime, and our immune system takes care of them. It's only when they miss them or they can't fight them off that we get sick. So that's the function of that system. Respiratory, this is for taking in oxygen, getting rid of CO2. Again, we load the blood with oxygen and then we unload the CO2 to get rid of that waste product. Digestive, this is for breaking down our foodstuffs into smaller molecules that we can absorb and that can go to the cells that the cells can use to build new structures, use for energy. So again, this is all the food that we eat that we digest and it goes to our cells from the digestive system. And then the urinary system gets rid of our what we call nitrogenous waste, or waste produced from the breakdown of proteins and other substances that we need to get rid of before they become toxic in our blood. So again, kidneys very important with that. We also have the bladder that holds the urine until we get rid of the urine when we go to the bathroom. Male reproductive system is job is to produce sperm, and that sperm's job is to unite with an egg in the female reproductive system to allow for us to make new human beings. So again, we produce what we call haploid sex cells. Both sperm and egg have half the number of chromosomes as a normal cell in the body, and when they unite, they create a full set of chromosomes that becomes the child that will eventually be born. And the last thing I'm going to go over in this video, and I'll make another one later, are the survival needs. Again, this is a good test question. Make sure you know what we have to survive. We need nutrients, we need oxygen, water, maintain a body temperature, and then also atmospheric pressure. So let's look at each one of these individually. Nutrients are chemicals for energy and cell building. So we have carbohydrates, proteins, fats, minerals, vitamins. All of these we get through our diet. And this is what we use to build new structures in the body or to fuel reactions in the body that we need to survive. Oxygen is something that we evolved to live with many, many millions of years ago when we were back as simple organisms. They started to have to be able to use oxygen. Oxygen is toxic. It's very toxic to living things. And we evolved to be able to use it in our metabolic processes, and now it's required that we have to have it. But what we do is make it less toxic by carrying it through several chemical reactions to prevent it from reacting with us. Oxygen is very, very reactive. If you've ever bitten into an apple and let it sit for a few minutes, it turns brown. That's the oxygen in the atmosphere oxidizing that apple, and it's actually changing the structure of it. And making it basically rust. It oxidizes. So again, we have to have it to survive, but we had to evolve to do that. And some organisms, like anaerobic bacteria, never did that, and they actually will die in the presence of oxygen. So again, as life formed, we had to be able to use this toxic substance that was produced by a photosynthetic organism in order to get rid of it. Water, this is something that we have to have. You usually can't live more than 2 to 3 days without water. And this is going to be the basis for chemical reactions. Without water, chemical reactions can occur in the body, and then we die. Once those chemical reactions stop, that's really what death is. It's a succession of chemical reactions. And then temperature, we have to maintain our temperature around 37 C. That's where our enzymes work the best. If we get out of that range, our enzymes stop working. We can't carry out chemical reactions as normal, and then that can also be fatal or harmful to the body. Atmospheric pressure, we have to have enough pressure outside of the lung to cause air to want to move into the lung when we lower the pressure inside. We'll go over that extensively when we get to the respiratory system. But just realize that if you were to say go up 30,000 feet in a plane and that cabin wasn't pressurized, you would not be able to breathe because there's not enough difference in pressure from the outside world and the inside world to make air move in and out of the lungs. We'll talk more about that while mountain climbers have to carry oxygen with them and pressurize the cup that goes over their mouth so that they can actually breathe at 29,000 feet, like at the top of Mount Everest. All right, I'm going to stop here and we'll begin back with homeostasis and we will discuss it and what that entails.